In this presentation, John and I want to explore the art and the music of Robbie Burns so that we can better appreciate his intellect, his accomplishments as an artist, and how he collected and shaped a musical legacy that to this day helps to inform Scottish national identity. Burns lived in an age, as we heard, of revolution, political revolution, economic revolution, and agriculture and cultural revolution. I think that one of the reasons Burns' music has not been celebrated for its sheer artistry and brilliance is because of the social position that Burns inhabited. And it's also the image that he cultivated for himself. Burns, like his father and his younger brother, was a tenant farmer. William Burness made sure that his sons Robert and Gilbert were educated. Burns attended school formally for a few years, but his father made sure that he always had access to the classics. William Burness, surprisingly, was a devout Presbyterian who believed in the importance of education. By the time that Burns arrived in Edinburgh, for the first time on November the 29th, 1786, he had decided not to emigrate to Jamaica as he had planned, because the Kilmarnock edition of his poetry, poems chiefly in the Scottish dialect, had become a sensation, and he was planning to print another edition in Edinburgh. Less than 2 weeks after arriving in Edinburgh, Henry Mackenzie, a lawyer, reviewed Burns's poems in a publication called The Lounger, where he compared Burns to Shakespeare, and he coins for the poet this epitaph: "Heaven taught plowman." The implication was that Burns was the natural man, a man with little education, with limited social standing, but he could write brilliant poetry. This moniker sticks, and the idea that Burns was a heaven-sent poet or heaven-taught plowman was nurtured and encouraged by the poet himself. The label, along with that of being Scotland's national bard, gave him social mobility and standing in a time when class and position mattered a great deal. The disadvantage of identifying as a common farmer was just that. He's a common man who talked about things that were not important, and the Edinburgh literati then could write him off. This is a quote from George Farquhar Graham, one of the founders of the Edinburgh Festival. "Perhaps there is no country in the world where the prejudice in favor of national music is carried to so great a height as in Scotland. This is the more surprising at first view because Scots, in many other respects, are a people singularly liberal and enlightened. Many of the Scottish melodies, having in themselves little intrinsic value, are yet fixed in the hearts and the affections of Scotsmen." End of quote. This quote is from a little known but from a far-reaching manifesto on good taste written in 1816 for the first Edinburgh Music Festival. Fred Freeman, in his article, Back to Burns, writes that Graham was, quote, "a man who most succinctly expressed the social and cultural value of a nation, formally disavowing its own outstanding achievement. Graham was neither the first nor the last to explain away the great anonymous song tradition of the Scottish borders, the Northeast and the Highlands, the songs of Ramsay, Burns, Hogg, and Tannahill, and many others, because they represented a popular culture that was not part of the way he and the elite arbiters of taste saw Scotland in the world. Edinburgh, which had become known as the Athens of the North, was so determined to be European and worldly, it was willing to reject what was common and to reject the Scots language as backwards and inferior. Burns disavows this attitude, and in the tradition of poets like Ramsay and Ferguson who had gone before him, he writes poetry and songs in Scots. In doing this, he not only adds to Scottish literature, but he collects, shapes, and saves a musical legacy that would have been lost without his effort. Imagine not having Burns songs today. Gerard Carruthers, a Burns biographer and scholar, points out that those who live in the 21st century, when we read the Burns canon today, we have access to everything, to his poetry, to his songs, to his letter, and to his commonplace journals. Burns, in his lifetime, was in control of his image and of his work. Carruthers suggests that to gain some perspective, we need to look at the Burns canon in two categories: the public, or the published canon, and the private, or the reserved canon. The published canon, in terms of music, is the collective work that Burns did with James Johnson and the publications The Scots Musical Museum, and George Thomson's select collection of Scottish airs. Burns collected, edited, and wrote over 350 songs. Some of the most popular songs he rewrote because they were vulgar and profane. And as he said to George Thomson in a letter, the songs as they were would not be appropriate for an English drawing room. The Merry Muses of Caledonia was a collection of unpublished poems and songs that Burns wrote for a drinking club that he belonged to called the Crocallan Fencibles. The Merry Muses manuscript contains versions of songs like Comin' Through the Rye and Green Grow the Rashes O. The song Green Grow the Rashes O first appears in Burns's first commonplace book in August 1784. Burns believed that paying attention to our experience, to our feelings, and to the natural world, in that we can find beauty in the midst of simplicity. The song is based on the popular idea that there are many things in life that challenge us and bother us, but the joys of love provide a way of making life more bearable. The idea of beauty and simplicity became apparent in phrases like, "What signifies the life of man," and "the wearily race may riches chase." This song is a seize-the-moment call from Burns. Rather than being seized by worldly pursuits, the hour seized can be more shrewdly used in love. That such an hour can bring together the sensations of feeling lucky, skillful, and pleasurable. My arms around my deario fixes and expresses the rich sensuousness of experience. Pursuing worldly appetites contrasts clearly with the stillness of lying quietly in a canny hour and air. The second and third stanzas make fun of the Calvinism of Burns' day. The second stanza says that spending time with the lasses should not be sneered at because it was King Solomon himself who loved the lasses. And the third stanza says that the loveliest work that old nature did was to make the lasses old. The song is mostly original, but the chorus was based on an older song. Burns changes the last two lines from the chorus. "The feather bed is no sae soft as a bed among the rashes o," to "The sweetest hours that I e'er spend are spent among the lasses." Please, friends, let's enjoy John's rendition of Green Grow the Rashes O. Right here, John. Right there.
There's naught but care on every hand, in every hour that passes, oh. What signifies the life of man, and 'twerna for the lasses, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. The sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses, oh. The worldly race may riches chase, and riches still may fly them, oh. And though at last they catch them fast, their hearts can ne'er enjoy them, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. The sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses, oh. But give me a canty hour at e'en, my arms about my dearie, oh. And worldly cares and worldly men may I get up saltery, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. The sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses, oh. For ye say deuce, ye sneer at this, you're naught but senseless asses, oh. The wisest man the world saw, he dearly loved the lasses, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. The sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses, oh. Old nature swears the lovely dears her noblest work she glasses, oh. Her prentice hand she tried on man, and then she made the lasses, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. Green grow the rushes, oh. The sweetest hours that e'er I spend are spent among the lasses, oh.
As I suggested earlier, part of Burns' genius is in his ability not just to situate words in certain ways that are meaningful and pleasant. He's able to take whole phrases from daily life. He's able to take sayings that were common, but Burns is able to take those phrases and paint a picture with phrases, giving us a wonderful song like A Red, Red Rose. Burns is not only steeped in Scottish literature and poetry and music, he knew the English canon thoroughly. He was aware of the philosophical and artistic debates that were raging in Europe during his lifetime. To get a sense of Burns's breadth of language, it's helpful to note that in his works, he uses over 2,000 words in Scots, 75 words in Gaelic, and he uses beyond the 8,000 words that Milton used in English. Unlike others, Burns was not at all interested in beating the English at their own game and write completely in English. He was going to write in his native language, in Scots, even though the dialect was not widely known. Unlike others, Burns believed that there was beauty in simplicity. And maybe no other love song expresses that more than the way A Red, Red Rose does. Thomas Crawford wrote a study on Burns's poetry and his music, and he revised that study later. He said this about A Red, Red Rose. A Red, Red Rose is yet another example of the perfection of the old, achieving the shock and immediacy of the new. The tradition on which it leans is that of the late 18th century popular songs and chapbook literature, the equivalent of pop or hit productions of a later age. And there is literally not a line or an image that cannot be traced back to some debased source. Burns's imagination and his ear gathered in these inherited comparisons and metaphor together, and he altered them, however slightly, mysteriously purging them of all vulgarity, and he created one of the loveliest lyrics in the language. Burns takes the common experience of admiring the beloved one, and he takes common inherited material, meaning tunes and phrases he knew, and he puts them together in a way that's not only beautiful, but the daily and the common become more. They become universal. Burns' music and art can speak to people across ages and across cultures because it comes from a tried and true tradition of common people through time. Friends, please listen to and enjoy John Young as he sings A Red, Red Rose.
Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love's like the melody that's sweetly played in tune. As fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I, and I will love thee still, my dear, till all the seas gang dry, till all the seas gang dry, my dear, and the rocks melt with the sun, and I will love thee still, my dear, while the sands of life shall run. Then fare thee weel, my only love, and fare thee weel a while, and I will come again, my love, though 'twere 10,000 mile, though 'twere 10,000 mile, my love, though 'twere 10,000 mile, and I will come again, my love, though 'twere 10,000 mile.
I was remiss. I should have also at the beginning thanked Matthew Larkin. John was very excited when he found out that Matthew was going to accompany him, and he told me that you jazzed it up. I've never heard Burns' music jazzed up like that. He's pretty good. For Burns, the idea of liberty goes along with an independent Scotland. Scotland had ceased to function as an independent kingdom in 1707 when, compelled by economic ruin, the nobility of Scotland agreed to unify the crowns of England and Scotland. They even gave away the name of Scotland and agreed to be called North Britain. Many common folk felt defeated and betrayed by the conduct of their royal leaders. In 1745, as many of you may know, led by the pretender to the Scottish and English thrones, Charles Stuart, the Highlands rose up in rebellion at the Battle of Culloden Moor, and they were brutally defeated by a combined English and Lowland Scots army. It was civil war. In the Lowlands, the Highlanders were despised as being tartan-wearing, Gaelic-speaking Catholic savages. Burns, of course, knows history, and in 1887 he tours the Borders, the Western Isles, and the Highlands. Burns falls in love with the Highlands, its history, and the people. Burns's art is influenced by experience and sentiment, but he has also embraced the idea of sympathy as espoused by the philosopher Adam Smith, one of John's favorite philosophers. Economist. Well, I was just going to say that, John. Smith, who is famously remembered as the founder of modern economics, published a book titled Theory of Moral Sentiments in 1759, which was one of Burns's favorite books. Putting ourselves in the place of another is the mechanism of sympathy that Smith espouses. You can see Burns's sympathetic approach in a poem like To a Mouse. The poem looks at life from the eyes of a mouse whose nest has been dug up by a plowman. Why this matters is because Burns puts himself in the shoes of the Highlanders, and he writes about them and their cause in a sympathetic manner. This brave act of sympathy is startling because in places like his native Ayrshire, Highlanders were hated. Burns lived in revolutionary times, and he admired the ideas of democracy, unlike many of the nobility of his day. Both the American and French revolutions are on Burns's mind as he mines through the history of the Highlands, and he mines the countryside for tunes and lyrics. In August 1793, in a covering letter to his colleague George Thomson, the Edinburgh music publisher, he writes that he's found a tune that has an important history. That tune is Hey Tootie Tatie. Burns claims that the tune was played as a marching song at the Battle of Bannockburn. Bannockburn was the famous battle where Robert the Bruce, the Scottish king, beat a superior English army led by Edward II, the Hammer of the Scots. It was that victory that gave Scotland independence for almost 400 years. This is what Burns writes to Thomson. There is a tradition which I have met in many places in Scotland, that it was Robert the Bruce's march at the Battle of Bannockburn. This thought warmed me to a pitch of enthusiasm on the theme of liberty and independence, which I threw into a kind of Scots ode fitted to the air, that one might suppose to be a gallant Royal Scots address to his heroic followers on that eventful morning. I had no idea of giving myself any trouble on the subject till the accidental reflection of the glorious struggle for freedom associated with the glowing ideas of some other struggles of the same nature, not quite so ancient, roused my rhyming mania. Burns takes the tune Hey Tootie Tatie and puts words to it, composing a song that for a long time has practically functioned as one of Scotland's national anthems. The song is Scots Wha Hae. In the song, Burns invokes the memory of national heroes like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce and their struggle for Scotland's liberty and independence. And he uses this song is still used to inspire present-day Scots to fight for their own freedom and their own independence. Now, as John sings this song, I think there's verses printed in the program, one verse, and you can join in. Two verses.
Depends how you count them.
Okay.
The last third of the song.
Okay. Let's enjoy this battle hymn of patriotic achievement as John sings it for us.
Okay, oops. So the first 2/3 of the song, I'm going to pretend I'm Robert the Bruce, so just imagine that I'm not short-sighted, imagine that I'm extremely warlike, not a public servant, and I'm very warlike, a warlike king, playing to win. And you are the army, and I'm trying to incite you. And so the last third of the song, I guess you could call it the last 2 of the 6 verses if you want, are in the program. And that is the army responding to Robert the Bruce's challenge. So if you feel like shouting, I know you sing so beautifully, I can't imagine you shouting, but give it a try. Like this is the army shouting back just before a battle, okay? Scots wha hae wi' Wallace bled, Scots whan Bruce has often led. Welcome to your gory bed, or to victory. Now's the day and now's the hour, see the front of battle lour, see approach proud Edward's power, chains and slavery. Wha will be a traitor knave, wha can fill a coward's grave, wha sae base as be a slave, let him turn and flee. Wha for Scotland's king and law, freedom's sword will strongly draw, freemen stand or freemen fa', let him on wi' me. By oppression's woes and pains, by your sons in servile chains, we will drain our dearest veins, but they shall be free. Lay the proud usurpers low, tyrants fall in every foe, liberties in every blow, let us do or die. And then they won the battle.
Burns is able to take airs from the Highlands, and he wraps these tunes with words from Lowland Scots. Gaelic tunes married to Habbie Scots. The history of the Highlands becomes symbolic of the plight of all of Scotland. Under the influence of Burns and others, the tartan moves from being a hated symbol of the Highlands to a cherished symbol of all families in Scotland. The bagpipes move from being the only musical instrument played in hell to being the instrument of dance, tattoos, and important events. Burns's poems and songs help to shape a national identity and build bridges between communities that had once despised one another. To be sure, most of Burns's poems and songs deal with the subjects of love, sensuality, beauty, nature, and common life. But like William Blake, who was writing and publishing poetry at the same time as Burns, both men were influenced by the ideas of democracy, liberty, and human dignity. While their poetic styles were much different, both men came from similar backgrounds, and they wanted their poetry to be accessible and appreciated by everyone. They both understood the power of literature in shaping ideas, identity, and community. For Burns, writing in the Scots dialect and collecting and shaping the Scottish folk music tradition was a sacred trust. It was a call. It was his vocation. I was in Edinburgh on July the 1st, 1999, when the Scottish Parliament sat for the first time since 1707. Parliament opened that day to do what many believe was Scotland's unofficial national anthem, Burns' song, "A Man's a Man," or "But for Honest Poverty." The song was written in the democratic fervor of Burns' time. It expresses contempt for prancing and titled aristocrats and sings praise for the simple and the decent individual. Many of the ideas in the song had been written by Alexander Pope in an essay on man that Burns had read. In fact, Thomas Crawford, in his study on Burns's poems and songs, lays excerpts from the Rights of Man beside "A Man's a Man," and convincingly shows that Burns may have lifted his vocabulary straight from pain to write his song. The ideas in the poem itself are old, but they gain power and significance in the struggle for democratic ideals of Burns's times. Its power comes from directness, firmness of statement, and sureness of conviction, especially in the last stanza, which is printed in the bulletin. "Then let us pray that come it may, as come it will for that, the sense and worth o'er all the earth shall bear the gree and a that, and a that, and a that. It's coming yet for a that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for a that." Sorry, the language not inclusive. The struggle for personal and political freedom from oppression goes beyond Scotland, beyond Europe and North America, and is extended to all humanity in this song. Burns has an important and lasting impact because he writes from experience, he writes sympathetically, and he is able to bring many different tunes, phrases, and ideas together in ways that are brilliant and beautiful. Let's enjoy John's rendition, "But for Honest Poverty."
As Sandy mentioned, the last verse is printed in the program. So once again, you were invited to sing that. I saw an interesting critical treatment of this song, and it said that the last verse is both a prayer and a prophecy. I thought that was quite nice. So it's not an army in this case. It's more prayerful for the coming of the New Jerusalem, or the millennium, if you will. Is there for honest poverty that hangs his head, and all that the coward slave we pass him by? We dare be poor for all that, and all that, our toils obscure, and all that, the rank is but the guinea stamp, the man's the gowd for all that. What though on hamely fare we dine, where hod and grey and all that, gie fools their silks and knaves their wine, a man's a man for all that, for all that. that, and all that, their tinsel show, and all that. The honest man, though e'er sae poor, is king of men for all that. Ye see yon birkie cod a lord, wi' strats and stairs and all that, though hundreds worship at his word, he's but a coof for all that. For all that, and all that, his ribbon star, and all that, the man o' independent mind, he looks and laughs at all that. A prince can mak a belted knight, a marquis, duke, and all that, but an honest man's aboon his might. Good faith, he maun for that. For all that, and all that, their dignities, and all that, the pith of sense and pride o' worth, are higher rank than all that. This is us now. Then let us pray that come it may, as come it will for all that, that sense and worth o'er all the earth shall bear the gree, and all that. For all that, and all that, it's coming yet. For all that, that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that. Thank you. You did this brilliantly.
John and I have enjoyed this project very much, and we hope that you get a sense of our enthusiasm for Burns's intellect and brilliance and artistic mind. Lots of people focus on other stuff, but he is a cultural and artistic giant. Burns' music and poetry helped to shape Scottish identity, I would suggest by creatively helping to heal wounds between antagonistic communities and helping create a national identity for a modern age and beyond that. The project was important to us because we learned so much and we gained a greater appreciation for an important artist who's been part of our personal and our family histories since we were children. Maybe most importantly, this project gave both of us something to work on and share together through the pandemic. And I'd also like to just make a note here. If you belong to a Scottish society or have a gathering and you need somebody to sing Burns' songs, phone John. John's the best singer of Burns music in the Valley.
At least the loudest.
Yeah. The project gave us both purpose and joy, which is important, because we're both disabled. John, over the last number of years, has totally lost his sight, and I have severe chronic PTSD. John has a white cane, I have a service dog, and we both have supportive partners who help us make our way in the world. Thank you. We're grateful to you all. Thank you for having us tonight. And now I would ask you to charge your glasses and to be upstanding for a toast. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bard.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet for old lang syne. And there's a hand my trusty fear, and gives a hand of thine, and we'll take a recht good willie walked for all.